Welcome back, everyone, to another recap episode of the College Sports Hive. Leif and I back with you this Sunday evening to talk about what transpired over the weekend with the college football slate of games. Kind of a crazy weekend we had this weekend with a couple upsets, a lot of the top 25 teams losing. One of those was a ranked matchup where Penn State got their second loss. So we're gonna start there and unpack that 7:30 Eastern time kick. Penn State kind of hung around in this game. They show that they have talent on both sides of the ball, but then again, they ran into a juggernaut in Ohio State's offense. Wouldn't you say, Mr. Indianapolis Colts celebrating a win?
Yep. No, I think the Penn State team, I was actually impressed. For a lot of the game, they slowed down a really good offense. I know they gave up 38 points. It was 38-25 Ohio State. And they gave up points and they gave up yards, but they showed they had the talent even without their stud linebacker, Micah Parsons, that we've talked about in the past, that they had the backs, the defensive backs and the linebackers to stop the run a little bit and stop some deep passes. And they only gave up one really truly big play after the first play, a little end around. Through the air, they only gave up one deep ball to Chris Olave that happened to be for a touchdown. So I think it was an encouraging performance, but that said, I think Ohio State's the most talented offense in the country.
I would say there's even points in this game where Ohio State didn't look their best on offense, and they still were able to score 38 points against a good Penn State team. We've touched on what Penn State's missing on the defensive side of the ball. They graduated a lot of talent, and then Micah Parsons sitting out. But Justin Fields, again, went 28 of 34, only 6 incompletions for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns. Let's talk about that performance a little deeper.
Yeah, he's really impressive. He's got a commanding presence of the pocket. He was rarely moved off his spot. He at one point was talking about in one of the interviews they showed in the game that his in the last game he was 20 of 21 and he was mad at himself for bad ball placement. So he's on a really elite level and they've certainly got the playmakers to help him out. I mean, Olave went 7 receptions, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then Garrett Wilson, really speedy guy, took an end around running play. And aside from that, he had 11 receptions, 111 yards. So they're a handful to deal with, and that they will be for everyone, not just Penn State.
I agree. I think Justin Fields, another underrated quality about his plays is athletic ability. There was a lot of times where Penn State had him dead to rights in the backfield with a couple people charging at him, and he still found a way to get it to his receivers. I think there's just a dynamic with this passing attack for Ohio State. If they lull you to sleep a little bit with the 5 to 10 yard outs that set themselves up with 2nd and 4, 2nd and 3, that happening, and then they can hit you with their running back at that point. Master T kind of solidified his role as a starting back with 23 carries, 110 yards, and a touchdown. They can hit you with that on 2nd and 4, or they can take that deep shot where Fields is just so dynamic in completing the ball downfield. So there's just so many levels to the game. They can have that 10, 15 play drive that takes 5 to 6 minutes off the clock, or they can also score like we saw on the opening drive of the game in 3 plays, a minute 17, and just punch you in the face to start the game off like that. So I think there's just so many different dynamic weapons, and they're dynamic both running and passing the ball for sure. They're not just one-dimensional with Justin Fields back there. Let's talk about the Ohio State defense, though. They kind of made a statement in their run defense. Penn State, we talked about that in our preview episode, that they gave up 210 yards on the ground to Nebraska. That's a lot of yards on the ground. They gave up excuse me. Let me find the stat. They gave up 44 total rushing yards to Penn State, 1.6 yards per carry. What do we think about that significant difference against a team that can run the ball?
Well, it was incredibly impressive. They got into the backfield on rushing plays, a lot of tackles for loss, and on plays that were supposed to be throws. They got into the backfield, and Clifford had to scramble up for his life to even get back to the line of scrimmage. So some of these stats were like 44 total rushing yards, 1.6 a carry. A lot of these were meant to be throws because Ohio State was so good at stopping the run. They wanted to throw, and they were still getting pressure even with 4-man rushes, not even blitzes, and they had to run for dear life. So it made Penn State have to be one-dimensional, and that really changed the game because they couldn't establish a run game and take away time of possession, which was really, as we diagnosed, the only chance they had to be really perfect on offense and take away the time where Fields had the ball. So I think that was the most important part of the game for Ohio State. Not how good Fields was. I think that was a given. The way they secured this win was not letting Penn State establish a rhythm and push the ball down the field through running and then play action plays. So I thought that was enormous and really will be every game from them here on out, because they really look like a title contender, and they'll have to be great on the run.
For sure. I think that's a really good analysis there. Let's talk about one of the one shining moments for Penn State on offense is the standout performance for Jahan Dotson. He had 8 receptions, 114 yards, and there are only 3 touchdowns. Talk about his performance in this game.
Oh, he was great. I mean, he was covered by Shaun Wade most of the game, who's probably going to be a first-round pick, and he made not only those 2 back-to-back catches, each of them with one hand, and one followed by the even more impressive Odell almost looking catch. But he got open. He presented someone who could take the top off the defense and let Freiermuth work underneath. If he's able to do that consistently, especially against good corners like Shaun Wade, that Penn State should be look to keep using that speed, the top end speed, to take off the top of the defense and use Freiermuth underneath. So they'll be in good hands. They're not going to play too many more Ohio States.
I think Penn State showed glimpses in this game. They showed glimpses of of the potential that they can offer to defenses on the offensive side of the ball. But like we touched on, they needed a near perfect performance to beat Ohio State this weekend, and that's not what we saw. We saw a lot of issues that still need to be ironed out. And I think from this point moving forward, you can safely say that the rest of their goal this season essentially is just kind of iron those things out and get people some experience for next year. Starting off the season 0-2 is a little tough to bounce back from. We're going to keep it in the Big Ten right now. The biggest upset of the weekend was unranked Michigan State, who had lost last weekend to Rutgers, a perennial bottom dweller in the Big Ten. Came up with a huge upset in the Big House, beating number 13 Michigan 27-24 in that classic rivalry of big brother, little brother. What do we take from that upset in Michigan State's performance?
It's peculiar because they played a bad game against a typically bad Rutgers team, and then they played a Michigan team coming off a really dominant performance against what was supposed to be a good Minnesota team, and then they got beaten by Maryland. But I thought that they played a solid game. It felt like good old smash mouth Big Ten football game, and Mel Tucker, the new coach for Michigan State, instilled his will on the game, and they ran a lot, and they ran a lot of play actions, deep shots, and came up with some good ones. Ricky White, the receiver for Michigan State, had 8 receptions, 196 yards, and a TD. So clearly he took the top off of defense, and they were able to come up with a lot of stands. There were a few goal line stands in this, coming up with 3 instead of 7, and that was huge in this game. And I thought Michigan, the big story was Joe Milton had to throw the ball 51 times to stay in this game. And I know it looks like a really close game, and it was, but Michigan State had a commanding lead in the fourth quarter, making Michigan play desperate football. And when you make Michigan one-dimensional in the throwing game, I think that's the easy way to beat them. And I was kind of disappointed in the way Michigan played this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the most surprising stat from this game is 51 passing attempts for Milton. He had a good game last weekend. He showed he was athletic and can throw the ball a little bit, but I was not expecting them to come out and throw the ball 51 times against Michigan State. Normally they're more attack on the ground. Their leading rusher only had 8 carries in this game. So that's kind of shocking that they went away from their formula so fast for success. And I think that'll be looked on a little bit. Let's talk about one stat that really stands out, and it's honestly with Michigan's head coach, Jim Harbaugh. He's now 1-6 at home this year against Ohio State and Michigan State. What do we make of that stat and kind of the inability to win those games that you need to win to be relevant as the University of Michigan?
Well, I think it's it's telling that they have all these recruits, and they recruit very well, and they've got a ton of talent, obviously. But I think it's a misleading stat somehow, just because Ohio State's been one of the best 3 football teams the past 7 years, and so since Harbaugh's been there, he's had to play one of the best teams each year. And so it's not entirely a fair stat. Yes, you want to beat your rival. It's a huge rivalry. But some years you're not as good as them, and I don't think they've had a better roster than Ohio State once. So I think that's bad. But I think in the case of Michigan State, D'Antonio left, and and they had a new identity. This was Michigan's year to win this game against Michigan State, especially at home, even though there were no fans. That they should have won this game, I think, and this is one game they'll look back on as the season goes on that they really feel like they should have won, especially to be moving up in the rankings where a lot of other teams ahead of them also struggled and didn't have definitive games.
I think it's pretty interesting, though, to build off of that a little bit of Ohio State's always having great rosters. And yes, that's true, but I think they brought Jim Harbaugh back to his alma mater to compete, regardless of what Ohio State's doing. They're expecting them to be the perennial Ohio State of what the Big Ten East has turned into. And like you've seen Penn State, for instance, go in and play super competitive games against Ohio State, beating them in 2016. And so I just don't think I think you can kind of say that they're not necessarily up to snuff on that point of what's happening with head coach Jim Harbaugh. And I think it's a stat that needs to be looked at moving forward. And I think he's honestly moving his way very quickly onto the hot seat there at Michigan with some of these performances. Let's move on to the ACC, a matchup that happened at noon Eastern time. It was an upset dwelling for a very long time. Boston College came out and led 28-13 at the half over number 1 Clemson. We touched on this in our preview. No Trevor Lawrence to start this game. He tested positive for COVID-19, so Boston College came into Death Valley and really played kind of one of the most perfect halves of football I have ever seen a team play in an upset role against the number 1 team in the land to take that lead. What were we thinking at halftime with them with this 28-13 lead?
I had enough trust in Dabo that I thought they'd get it done, but I certainly wasn't comfortable in that thought. Boston College played a fabulous first half, 28-13. Whether Trevor Lawrence is playing or not is incredibly impressive. Like DJ Uiagalelei, oh man, I butchered it. I got it last time. Anyway, DJ, the 5-star quarterback for Clemson, he played well and he was good, but he wasn't Trevor Lawrence. And I think he had some nerves at the beginning, but it wasn't really what he didn't do. It was what Phil Yurkovich and C.J. Lewis did. They moved the ball up and down the field to expose some weaknesses in a typically very good Clemson defense, and they scored on their drives. And then they had one huge play where they turned a fumble that was on the doorstep of their own end zone into 7 points for them, a 14-point swing. And those things are so uncharacteristic for Clemson that you were worried as a supporter of Clemson. You want them because they're one of the best teams in the country to play in the college football playoff, that you were worried that these type of things don't typically happen to Clemson. And maybe it was because Trevor Lawrence wasn't there, but maybe it wasn't. And they might have some weaknesses this year that could be exposed. And Boston College certainly pushed them to the brink.
I think Yurkovich is a great quarterback. And I think he came out throwing the ball very aggressively and saying, look, we have one chance to beat this team, right? And we're going to have to score points. Travis Etienne carried the ball 20 times and caught it for 7. So I said you could probably expect him to be around the 30 touches mark. Came out to be the case. He ran the ball for 84 yards, a touchdown. But more effectively, he caught the ball extremely well out of the backfield with a long touchdown reception in the first quarter, and then another 140 yards after that, But I just think, to build off of your point a little bit, I just think Boston College came out and said, look, they're without their best player. We're going to go out and be as aggressive as humanly possible and make this a dogfight. And it turned out that they played super well and they were up huge at halftime. Then I think they got a little complacent, mixed with Clemson kind of woke up a little bit, and they're like, okay, we're on the brink here. This could make or break our season. We need to make something happen. And DJ came out and he only had 11 incompletions. He played a great game. He threw for 342 yards and 2 touchdowns. He didn't turn the ball over. Like, he had a great game in replace of Trevor Lawrence. I just think it was a little bit of a groggy start for the Clemson defense, and just coupled with a super go at it approach for Boston College. You know what I mean? So what do you think that's kind of fair to say?
Yeah, for sure. And then I thought that DJ, the difference between him and Trevor Lawrence is just Trevor Lawrence is so assured, like you know what you're going to get every time. And I think there was a few drives where DJ was really being careful with the ball because it was his first start and he wanted to take care of it, because I'm sure undoubtedly he was told, like, look, if you take care of the ball, we'll probably win this game. And so he did. But there's these things that Clemson can do when they have the full playbook with Trevor Lawrence, where they take these deep shots with Cornell Powell, who did have a good game, but he had a lot of receptions to get there. And I thought that Boston College tried to make DJ beat them in the first half, and DJ was able to keep them in it. And whereas if you try that approach with Trevor Lawrence, I don't think it works. But certainly Boston College came out and threw some body blows, and they were giving it all they had in the first half. And then they woke up a beast and then became complacent. Like you said, I think they should have just tried to play a full game of this underdog mentality. And I know it's hard to do, but that's how you have to play when you're playing the best team in the land, or supposed to be one of the best teams in the land.
Speaking of Trevor Lawrence and his kind of assurance in that role as the starting quarterback of Clemson, they will be without that next week as they go to South Bend. Head coach Dabo Swinney came out after the game and just put it out there that Trevor Lawrence will not play in that game. They're going to hopefully be able to allow him to travel, but just due to the protocols laid out by the ACC, due to recovering from COVID-19 positive tests, it's not going to happen for Trevor next week, unfortunately. So we're going to see DJ get another start in probably one of the biggest games of the season in the grand scheme of football, not just the ACC in general. So with that news breaking, it's going to be pretty important for DJ to kind of build off of the performance this week moving into next week.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be a monster game that we'll have for you next week.
Absolutely. We'll get to that in our preview episode and our news episode and all that good stuff. A lot to talk about there. Let's get back to this team that I'm starting to believe in more and more each week, is Cincinnati. They took on Memphis this weekend, who was the champion of the American last year, and they laid it all on the line again and proved that they are a dominant force to be reckoned with. Because let's face it, they took on SMU, who was ranked 16th and was clearly the second best team in the American heading into this week. And then you have the former champions, and to beat them soundly by the point differentials that they've had is just a very, very impressive stat, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think Cincinnati did not forget that Memphis beat them in the American Championship game last time. I think they came out with a vengeance. Desmond Ridder in particular, he came out 21 of 26, 271 yards through the air, 3 TDs, and then he had 2 TDs running the ball. So that's 5 TDs and rushing. He also, so over 300 yards and 5 TDs, and that was enough, obviously, to get it done. But more impressively, I mean, if they can score, a lot of teams in the Americans can score. What separates Cincinnati is their defense. They held Memphis, who scores at a ridiculous rate. Brady White had 18 touchdowns entering this week, and he was held in check, to the tune of barely 50% completion rate in an air raid offense. They get after the quarterback. They have ball hawks in the secondary. I'm starting to believe in them that they really could contend for that 4th college football playoff spot. They'll need some luck, and I think they just need to keep going about their business, and winning by these margins is really helping them. Whereas some other teams like Notre Dame and Georgia, they both look like Notre Dame won convincingly, but they didn't look dominant, and Georgia looks very vulnerable right now. So if they keep taking care of business, they're going to be really, really hard to leave out.
I agree. I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic moving forward with yet the final Power 5 conference coming into the fold this weekend with the Pac-12 starting play. But absolutely, I think they cannot be denied at this point in time. They are clearly the cream of the crop outside of Power 5 teams, and I think they would beat the majority of Power 5 teams. I think coupled with their defense and their powerful offense, it's just a force to be reckoned with, and they're proving it by just basically dismantling everyone that they play in the American Conference. It's been very impressive. I think you hit the nail on the head. They're going to need a lot of luck. They got that this weekend with the Oklahoma State loss, but you see next weekend Notre Dame plays Clemson. One of those two are going to have to lose. But at the same point in time, I think there's going to be teams like Oregon if they play well, someone from the Pac-12 South potentially if they play well, someone from the Pac-12 if they have a good season, go undefeated. You could say they have a significant chance to claim that spot. I think basically at this point you're down to one team in the Big Ten, and that's Ohio State. You're down to almost one team in the SEC. And the Big 12's kind of shot. So at this point in time, they're sitting there looking at this thing, licking their chops a little bit, going like, let's go. We got an opportunity here.
Do you think there's only one team in the SEC? You think Bama are you saying one more team, assuming Bama gets in, or just Bama?
I'm kind of thinking just Bama at this point. I mean, I would have to see a lot more from Georgia. Let's just say that. I think they have to beat Alabama. I think that's what lies ahead of them. They have to win out and beat Alabama, and I just don't think that they have enough power on offense. I think we can get to that point in a little bit, but yeah, at this point, I'm kind of thinking we're just going to see Alabama out of the SEC.
Yep.
So with that being said, we touched on Oklahoma State losing. They went down to Texas in overtime, 41 to 34. Sam Ehlinger played really well again this weekend. Let's touch on that first.
Ehlinger didn't have his best statistical game, but he managed the game really well. And you know what he did? He didn't have any turnovers, and that was the difference in this game. There were 5. They won the turnover battle 4-0. And Ehlinger, being an experienced quarterback, they played 3 overtime. This was their 3rd overtime game already. That really helped them. They won 41-34 in overtime on the road at Stillwater, and that was a hostile environment. There are fans there, and he did enough to keep his team in good positions and didn't need the big plays. He just needed to play smart and manage the game well.
It's kind of crazy though that Oklahoma State outgained Texas 530 to 287 yards of total offense, and then it just turns over on itself. Then when you look at the turnover differential of 4-0, like you steal 4 different possessions that Oklahoma State didn't get, so it's kind of like what happened to Penn State in week 1 when they played Indiana and turned the ball over 3 times twice in the first half. So it really goes to show your point there with Sam Ehlinger not turning the ball over and then being able to capitalize on those turnovers when they got the ball into the red zone. They scored points.
And one other big thing in this game was that Texas was able to limit Chuba Hubbard. Typically that's how they eliminate turnovers for Oklahoma State, is they don't have to throw to stay in games. They can run the ball and then have some play action or some run pass options. And in this game, they had to throw to even get the yardage to stay in the game, because Hubbard was 25 for 72. That's unheard of for a guy as productive as he's been in his entire college career. And the other thing is, we talked about Oklahoma State's defense being legit last week, and don't think because there were 41 points given up that they're not. They had to deal with 4 extra possessions and some deep in their own territory and in overtime. So I think they're still very legit despite losing this game. But this game was on Spencer Sanders, the quarterback of Oklahoma State's shoulders. He's got to take better care of the ball with 4 turnovers of his own.
100%. Moving on to the team I touched on, saying probably has the only chance to make the college football playoff in the SEC. Alabama looked absolutely fantastic this weekend. They pitched their first shutout of the season. We posed the potential that the air raid there at Mississippi State with Mike Leach coming in might pose them some problems, but they shut that down real quick, winning 41-0 there this weekend, looking dominant as ever. Devontae Smith is that guy. You know what I mean? He is that guy. He stepped up so big this weekend. 11 catches, 203 yards, and 4 touchdowns. How about that performance?
He's been with some extremely talented players. They had Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy last year, and he had one of these type of games last year. But you're like, oh, that's just because you got the 1 and 2 cornerbacks are occupied. No, he's that guy. He can, and then they lost Jalen Waddle, but now you're seeing the best of the best guarding him, and he's still torching them. So you look forward to seeing him in the pros as well. This is going to be his last college year, college fans. I'm sorry, and Mac Jones is that guy too. He's a Heisman frontrunner right now. Like he's putting up ridiculous numbers on par with what Joe Burrow did last year, and everyone talks about how historic that run was. So Alabama's only getting better and better, and I agree with you. I think they're certainly the team to beat in the SEC, as wasn't too bold to say, but also that the time to beat them was earlier this season. They're getting better and better, and there's enough tape out on the air raid and Mike Leach that Bama and Saban had no problem shutting that down. And I think their defense is the thing that needs to improve still. But if this is an indication that they're going to be really hard to stop.
Yeah, I think Mississippi State, too, is just a little bit lost. I don't think they played very well again. But we touched on Mac Jones. I think he's number 2 right now in the Heisman discussion behind Justin Fields. I'm sorry, Justin Fields is already number 1 for me. I think he's the most prolific player in college football. So yeah, I think Mac Jones, and he's been quiet about his marks this year, about his stats. He's had tremendous stat lines, but also he's not at the front line of headlines most often. There's been a lot of things surrounding this Alabama team with the loss of Jalen Waddle, with how bad the defense has looked at times, not this week, but things that have kind of overshadowed how great he's playing. And I think now, once you see something like this happen, this is a full circle game for Alabama and the SEC. They put it all together, and they said, like, Mississippi State might not have it all together right now, but we are not even entertaining the possibility that this is going to be a game. And that's the Alabama that is scary for a lot of teams moving forward. So I think he's number 2 right now, for me at least, slated under Justin Fields in that Heisman Trophy discussion. Do you think we'd see this Alabama team tested before the regular season's done?
Are we counting the conference championship games? So probably not for regular season.
I just meant regular season.
Yeah, I don't. I agree with you. I think that the tests that they were meant to have already happened in Texas A&M and Georgia. So I think Alabama's going to cruise the rest of the year. I mean, Auburn will be rivalry game, and there are fans down there, so that'll be interesting. But this Auburn team's very inconsistent, and I think Alabama's too much for them. So I think they are out of the woods for the most part.
Just when you think of that, something crazy happens in college football. But we'll see what happens the rest of the year moving forward.
I won't be mad if something crazy happens, another kick 6 or something.
They looked phenomenal. This weekend against Mississippi State there. Notre Dame dominated the game. They won 31-13. Ian Book had a decent performance. He was held under 200 yards passing, but this game was never really out of control for Notre Dame. Do we think they have what it takes to pull that upset next weekend?
I think this is as good a chance as they can have. I don't think this Notre Dame team is better than the one 2 years ago that made the playoff and got throttled by Clemson. I don't think they're better than the team that lost in the Fiesta Bowl to Ohio State. But I think this year in college football, there are 3 elite teams, and there is lacking a 4th. And they could be the 4th. And Clemson doesn't have the best player in college football in Trevor Lawrence. So and it's in South Bend. So I think this is as good a chance as ever. They've got a great offensive line as usual. Their defense isn't quite as good as it has been in past years with NFL talent, but Clemson doesn't look as good defensively as they have either. So if they control the ball, which is typically the recipe, run the ball, they always have a good running back. And this year it's Kyron Williams, and then don't turn it over. They can really pose some issues. And I think they're going to ask DJ to beat them. I think they're going to try to stack the box and say, we're not letting Travis Etienne beat us. We're gonna have a freshman 5-star show us what he's made of.
I agree. I think they're gonna have to play a lot better to win that game next weekend. We'll have all that coming your way this next week moving forward. Let's touch on some other games pretty quickly here as we move on. K-State got upset this weekend by West Virginia. They were Kansas State. That is, excuse me. They came in number 16 in the country this week, and we both got that one wrong. What happened there?
I think it's as simple. The Deuce did not get loose. I was very happy to say that line with Deuce Vaughn as a 5'5" jitterbug of a running back, and he's their electric playmaker. So they need those big plays without their starting quarterback Skylar Thompson. They had to have big plays, and they couldn't produce any of those, and their defense didn't play up to what it had been either into this game.
Yeah, no starting quarterback really hurt K-State in that one, and that one wasn't even really that close. 37-10 is kind of a drubbing there in Morgantown. Speaking of a non-drubbing, Georgia looked kind of vulnerable again this weekend. They only beat Kentucky 14-3. I think Kentucky's a decent football team, but I do think Georgia's defense is miles ahead of their offense. What do you think the issue is for Georgia on offense?
Oh yeah, no, their defense is, if not the best defense in the football. I think Cincinnati's certainly up there too, but they're very, very, very good. And Stetson Bennett is the 4th is what's holding them back. I like him. He's got a cool story, but I think he needs to start playing better, or they need to try another option. In fact, he wasn't even the starting quarterback the first week, and it was Dwan Mathis. And I think they've got a better quarterback on their roster that hasn't even got the field yet. Yes, he's new, but you got to let a good quarterback throw to these playmakers they've got, like George Pickens, and I don't know. I think they don't have a chance of making the college football playoff, aka beating Alabama. with Stetson Bennett as their quarterback.
Yeah, what do you think the reason is that we haven't seen JT Daniels yet? USC transfer from moving
The
in.
only thing I can think of is his knee isn't recovered. He tore his ACL last year, for those who aren't familiar. But he was having a great year at USC. He was a 5-star recruit, and he's now in an offense that could really fit his weapon. Like, he's got great weapons that fit his game. I think it's either familiarity with the system or his knee's not ready. And if he is ready, I can't think of a reason why he's not playing. He's very talented, and all they need is someone who can make the throws, because Stetson Bennett is 5'11", and he just doesn't have the accuracy that a Drew Brees or Russell Wilson type. That's the prototype for someone that short. And he's not leading them down the field, and he's getting passes batted down for interceptions, and their drives are stalling because he's not as good as their past quarterbacks that they've had.
I agree. I think that's pretty fair to say. I'm going to say 2 words to you right now, and I want to get your initial reaction on those 2 words. Coastal Carolina.
Top 15. That 51-0 on a game that that was supposed to be very close. It was a 3 and a 3.5 spread, depending the websites, and they win by 51 and don't even give up a point. That's top 15 material, and that's where they are. They deserve it.
Yeah, the initial polls that we've seen has shown them as high as 15 in the rankings. Just kind of an absolutely bonkers story that keeps getting crazier as the weeks progress. I just think it's so fun to see, like, this in this crazy turbulent year of 2020. You just have this team that's come on and say, look, we're here to play. Like, we're 6-0 now. We're balling out. We just won 51-0. Like, who's got next? Like, it's one of those teams where we'll never really know how legit they are, but due to the people that they play. But as of right now, they're viewed as a pretty high valued team.
Yeah, for sure. They've got a Big 12 win too in their non-conference, so it's not just the Sun Belt. Like, I'm riding them until they lose. They may not get any higher than where they are, especially with Pac-12 coming back. But this is a good football team, like, legitimately good, and it's a fun story.
Absolutely. We're smiling as we're talking about this. It's just one of those things in college football that doesn't happen that often. You don't see a team come in just completely out of nowhere and say, we're gonna dominate, like, really dominate. You know what I mean? Like up to 15 in the country after 6 weeks of playing is just nuts. So
you don't get Cinderellas in college football.
Yeah, you see Cinderellas in March Madness in college basketball, and people beating people in games where, they have a 1 in 10 chance to win. These guys have been winning 6 straight games and looking better and better each week. So it's going to be a storyline to look forward to every week moving forward until if something tragically happens, that would be very sad. But as of right now, it's a very happy moment for football fans. I thought there was a chance that Missouri could catch Florida sleeping this week. We didn't really know what was going to happen with the Florida team coming onto the field this weekend. Showed that they didn't really miss a beat coming off that loss to Texas A&M. They beat Missouri 41-17. Trask did play in the game. Kyle Trask, Florida's QB. What did we see in that game?
I think that was just that they had desperation. They had weeks to prepare, whether they had all their guys or not. And it so happened that they had their 3 biggest playmakers on offense, Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, and Kadarius Toney. And that was enough. They could score points. Missouri's defense isn't very good. I don't think this team, unless they get everyone back healthy, really has a chance to compete, because their defense isn't fabulous anyway, but they're missing 3 starting defensive backs and a lot more, but those are the 3 most notable players. I mean, if they can figure out their situation, this is a dangerous team. They could beat Georgia and compete with Alabama in the SEC championship game because they're representing the East. So this is a really dangerous team that for college football, 1, you want health, and 2, this is a team that has the talent to play with the big dogs. So I'm hoping that this was a step in the right direction and that they've got their stuff sorted out.
I agree. So that kind of brings us to a conclusion on the games that we're going to talk about from this weekend. If you have any other things that you want to hear us talk about, anything like that, feel free to give us a shout. We'll leave you guys tonight with the pick results from this week. We tied again somehow with the exact same record, 7-3. Leif, you lost your LSU pick, and then we both lost Kansas State and Oklahoma State, the 2 ranked matchups that lost. I lost Missouri with that kind of heart over head pick over them beating Florida. But yeah, we both went 7-3 again. What's happening here? We're 14-6 overall.
I think what we're both learning is we should pick with our head, not our hearts. I picked the Kansas State game with my heart because I thought the Deuce was going to get loose, and I did think he'd have a better game than he did. But I had up until the whole way I had West Virginia, and I'm mad at myself for messing with that one. But you know what? 7-3 is not horrible. We're both doing all right.
Yeah, I think it shows that we at least know a little bit of what we're talking about. But yeah, I was pretty proud of myself with Bo Nix and Auburn over LSU. That was kind of a drubbing there.
Yeah,
that
one wasn't pretty.
So, all right, everyone, that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks so much for all your support through our second week of production. We're just having so much fun doing this for everyone. Make sure you reach out and tell us what you want to see. If you think of anything that we can do to spice it up a little bit, make it not that it's not interesting for everyone, but like anything that you want to hear us talk about or anything like that, please feel free. We're available anytime. And then, yeah, just make sure to check us out on Spotify, check us out on YouTube, check us out on Instagram. We're pretty much available anywhere you could possibly want to look for us. So thanks everyone for the support, and we'll catch you on Tuesday for more news that just keeps growing and keeps building.
Yeah, lots of news this year, and like Scott said, let us know if you want to hear anything, and tell friends. I mean, a lot of people like college football. If they want someone to break down games that they have any real interest in, we'll be happy to, and we'd love to see our following grow and provide what we liked with you guys as well.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Leif and I are signing off. We'll catch you Tuesday.
Thank you.